Alright guys, welcome back. We'll pick up where we left off. Alicia part. Let's do Qingguan Ming. Okay, looks like he's gonna be tied. I had finally seen a true marksman today. The custodian, who loved soap operas so much that he would bawl his eyes out, had averted Lieutenant Kang's crisis with just a toy gun. And it was from such a distance. Forget about it being a toy gun. Even with a real gun, it would be incredibly hard to hit the temple of your target. If I had gone on the mission by myself, everything would have been over by now. I hadn't realized that I couldn't shoot a gun until I enrolled in the police academy. Every time I tried to aim, I couldn't calm down and concentrate. No matter how hard I trained, I couldn't improve my shooting performance. The academy even sent me to a specialized psychologist, although we didn't find anything wrong. Unsurprisingly, I got a 0 in my final shooting test. I became the laughingstock of the class. If it weren't for my outstanding grades in the combat tests convincing the academy to make an exception for me, I would probably still be wasting bullets in training. Guns must simply not agree with me. There couldn't be any other explanation. The custodian had gone back to the police station. All we needed to do was wait for the reinforcements from the station and clean up the mess. By the way, even though I wasn't good with them, I could still appreciate guns. I still thought that it would feel great if I could have one with me all the time. I was playing with a gun that I had just picked up off the ground. It must have belonged to one of these losers. When I was feeling a little drunk with the power in my hand, a stranger walked out of the shadow behind the cargo container. He was a huge muscular man in his 40s or 50s. He was wounded, but both the tattoo on his bald head and the scars at the corners of his eyes were telling me that he would not be afraid of a fight. I held the gun steady and pointed it at him when Lieutenant Kang casually said, "He's one of us." Lieutenant Kang was sitting on top of some passed-out lackey in a pink-striped shirt. He was holding half of a cigarette in his hand, and he had just exhaled a puff of murky white smoke. I was shocked. This person didn't look like a police officer at all. Well, I suppose they were all birds of a feather. Unit 4 must have plenty of weirdos like them. I lowered the gun, stood straight, and gave him a salute. "Sir, I am Qingguan Ming. I was just assigned to Unit 4 a week ago. It is a pleasure to meet you." "Pleasure to meet you, too." It wasn't the hulking officer who had responded. It was Choi Yo-han, who was standing behind him with a gun pushed up against his head. "Did you all think it was fucking over?" He held his gun against the officer's temple while rubbing his own bruised head with the other hand. Crap. I had somehow forgotten that he had only been shot by a toy gun. How could I have made such an idiotic mistake again? Lieutenant Kang slowly stood up too. His cigarette was still burning, but he had no interest in smoking it again. Now those are the kind of looks that I like. Kid, raise your gun. I wasn't sure what trick he was trying to play, but I involuntarily held onto it more firmly. "I'm giving you 2 choices. Your lieutenant, or this meathead here. Use your gun to make your pick. Put a bullet in his head, and then we are done. Don't play any tricks on me." What? I must have heard it wrong. I had never been trained for this scenario back at the academy. Choi Yo-han chuckled. "Oh, also, I'm the kind of person who doesn't have too much patience, so I'll give you 5 seconds. How about that? Let's begin the countdown. 5. I slowly raised the gun while my arms suddenly felt like they had been filled with lead. On one side, it was the senior officer whom I had just met. On the other side, it was Lieutenant Kang. What kind of sick joke was this? I must calm down and think. There must be some other way. But I had only 5 seconds. 4. Lieutenant Kang was standing to my right. The cigarette in his hand had already burned out. He was standing there completely motionless like a statue. Our eyes met in mid-air, but time kept flowing. My hands were shaking. 3. I pointed my gun at Choi Johan. I tried my best to aim at his forehead. Could I make the shot? 2. The officer looked at me calmly. He seemed to be telling me with his eyes, I trust you. But I couldn't trust myself. 1. Huge drops of sweat were rolling down my face. No, I couldn't make it. I gave up. The officer's head exploded right in front of my eyes. Then the gun barrel turned to me, with a sliver of smoke still creeping out of it. Choi pulled the trigger. The bullet hit me and knocked me over. King Bakya, how does it feel watching your men die in front of you, huh? I felt my eyelids getting heavier and heavier. I couldn't see the expression of Lieutenant Kang's face. The voice of Choi mocking and taunting the lieutenant was getting further and further away, too. A few weeks later, I woke up in the Busan Metropolitan Hospital. Tubes were coming out of every part of my body. The EKG machine was beeping steadily next to the bed. Captain Guang told me when he visited me that I was the only survivor from the warehouse. How could this have happened? Someone please tell me that this was just a dream. Please, Buddha. They were all good people. Please, please help them. Cheng Guangmin. Okay. Aw. My dad had a bad temper. He often hit my mom and me. One day, I knocked him out with a bottle to help Mom. I thought he would beat me up once he woke up, but I never expected that people from a mental hospital would show up at our door. These strangers were here to take me away. Mom was not at home. I could still hear the last words Dad ever said to me. Bastard. I was not ill. I was taken to the hospital because I was a bad child. However, everybody here would insist they were not ill. Besides, the male nurses here were all as strong as bears. They could lift me off the ground with a single hand. There was no way I could escape from here. I was put in a very small room alone. There was a desk, a chair, and a simple bed. The sheets and blankets looked yellowed, and they were covered with stains. The walls were very dirty too, and someone had written a lot of bad words in the corners. I would try to talk with the female nurses, just to get through the day. Soon I realized that as long as I kept saying nice things about them, they would tell me anything I wanted to know. I had learned from them that the hospital was not too far away from my home. They said that the president of the hospital was a relative of someone important in the government. That was how the hospital had received a lot of government funding, but the president had pocketed most of it for himself. They also said that the president was rarely here. The person who was really in charge was the vice president, Dr. Lee Yun-sok. Dr. Lee was an expert in his field, and he always looked out for his employees. If it weren't for him, the hospital would have closed down a long time ago. It was a Tuesday. I had been here for 2 days, but I hadn't seen one doctor yet. If I could have Dr. Lee examine me, maybe he would know that I wasn't really ill and let me go home. Around dinner time, I was waiting for the tray to be put through the door when it opened. A tall, slim male nurse stood at the door and said he would take me to see the doctor. I'd never seen him before. He probably worked in another building. I followed him downstairs across the garden into another building. We walked up to the 5th floor and stopped at the door of an office. The name tag on the door said Lee Yun-sok. I sat nervously on the medical stool. It was very dark inside and no lights were turned on. I could smell a faint scent in the room. It was only the 2 of us in the room. He asked a few simple questions first. To prove I was a good child, I answered all of the questions honestly. I also told him that Dad would beat Mom and me, and why I thought I had been brought here. It was because Dad thought I was a bastard, a bad child. You are here because you have a condition called selective cognitive impairment. Dr. Lee took off his white coat and laid it on the back of his chair. Selective cognitive impairment? I had never heard of it. I could barely say it. In other words, you have a tendency of fantasizing about events. For instance, you said your father had choked your mother with a rope, but that never happened.
That's not true. Dad must have lied to you. He beat me. He even poured boiling water on me. I can show you. I took off my shirt and turned my back towards him. I showed him the burn scars that went from my neck all the way to my back. That was what Dad had given me when he doused me with boiling water. Dr. Lee raised his hand and touched the scars with his fingertips. His hand was so cold that I took a deep breath.
You are mistaken. It wasn't your father who did this to you. Your symptoms are quite severe. If we don't do something about it, it might very likely turn into schizophrenia.
I turned around and saw Dr. Lee removing his belt.
That would be an even worse condition. People with the condition have to be tied down to their beds. They can't go outside, not even to the bathroom. Every day they need to go through electroversions therapy. In more serious cases, we might even perform brain surgery on them.
Perhaps I was too frightened. I felt my entire body getting warm and my knees were becoming weak. Dr. Lee told me not to move.
Don't be afraid, kid. As long as you do everything I tell you, one day you will fully recover.
I didn't want to stay, but for some reason I was frozen by fear and I didn't know what to do. He was preparing his belt with the large buckle taking on a new meaning. I was so scared. Please, doctor, let me go. I could only beg him to let me go. He just laughed.
Let you go? That's not going to happen. You're here because of a lot of money.
Money? Suddenly, an excruciating sharp pain washed over my entire body. My brain stopped thinking. His heavy leather belt cracked against my back again and again. I couldn't hear anything he said afterwards. All I could hear was some deafening buzzing noise in my ears. A full-length mirror was hung on the wall on the right side of the room. I could see my pale upper body lit by the moonlight and the reflection. I raised my hand, hoping that the smaller body in the reflection would turn out not to be me. But the person in the mirror, whose face was crying and twisting in pain, despair, slowly raised his hand too, just as I did. No, 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 no. The excruciating pain shot through my back, thawed my fear as I started to resist. I pushed the files on the desk away, and then I felt something. A gun. Dr. Lee didn't notice what I was doing. I put my index finger on the trigger and raised the gun, shaking uncontrollably. I turned to my right. I pulled the trigger. The mirror suddenly shattered into pieces and scattered all over the floor. Dr. Lee was extremely shocked. He twisted the gun out of my hand and threw it onto the medical stool. The tall, slim nurse opened the door and peeked inside. But the moment he saw Dr. Lee shaking his head, he stepped back out again and closed the door. It was still just the two of us. Nothing had changed, even though I had smashed the mirror and its reflected horrors to smithereens. Nothing had changed. I saw numerous blue eyes in the broken pieces of the mirror. All of those eyes belonged to me. I was in the mirror. So, who was the person that was outside of the mirror? I couldn't seem to recognize him. This yellow-haired and powerless child, who was he? Park Sung-gun. I wonder, since all of the characters seem to be connected, if he actually turns out to be Jack when he's older.
That would be interesting. Let's see here. If we do... If we do this... Let's see here. If we keep it with this... Let's try it this way. Three. I pointed the gun at Lieutenant King. Choi Yo-han was not easy to fool. I had to choose the lieutenant in order to save the officer. As long as I didn't hit any critical spots, the lieutenant would be okay. could also stall for a little bit longer. My hands were shaking like never before. It reminded me of the only time that I had ever hit inside the target. It was a very windy day, and I was wearing nothing but a tank top, so I had been trembling because of the cold. Now that I was shaking so hard, maybe there would be another miracle. 2. Lieutenant King saw me pointing the gun at him. He didn't look like he blamed me. I could see that he understood that it was my plan to stall, but he didn't know that I was an extremely lousy shot. 1. Huge drops of sweat were rolling down my face when I pulled the trigger. The bullet flew out of the barrel and hit Lieutenant King in his left arm. I made it. I actually made the shot. However, Choi Yo-han was obviously not satisfied with the result. Kid, are you really such a terrible shot? Or are you just trying to fool me? I guess I'll have to teach you a lesson. He moved his gun away from the officer's temple and pointed it at his back. Bang! A red hole appeared in his stomach. The officer's face turned pale, but he didn't wince even a little, trying not to worry us. What a man he was. Oh well, I'm also a pretty nice guy. How about I give you another chance? This time, aim at the head. See, right here. He poked his gun at the officer's temple while laughing like a maniac. My anger was boiling inside me. I couldn't listen to any more bullshit coming out from the butterface of that bastard. But what could I do? No matter how fast I could possibly move, I couldn't be faster than a bullet. A shadow leapt past me from behind while I was still trying to think. A splash of blood spilled to the floor inside of my shadow that was cast by dim lights. A gun was sticking out of Choi Yo-han's mouth. No, it was barely a mouth anymore. Choi's body was falling to the ground at the same speed as my vomit. Lieutenant King took the gun out of Choi's hand. There was no warmth in his eyes, and he looked like someone else completely. The will to kill was radiating from him. The will to kill every single living thing in sight, even those that had already been incapacitated. A minute later, those who had passed out in the warehouse would never wake up again. The officer was lying next to Choi Yo-han's body, still bleeding. I couldn't tell if he was still breathing. Lieutenant Kang's eyes then turned to the only remaining person alive in the warehouse. He looked into my eyes, then he raised his gun. If I killed him, I would become a murderer. Where would I be able to run if I became a murderer? I put down the gun. Tears of pain streamed down my face. I decided that I would survive this. And then I swore to myself that I would find another chance. I swore. I didn't turn my head, and I didn't close my eyes. I wanted to burn his evil face into my memory, along with the man who sold me for money. What have you done to me? One day I will pay you back, plus extra. I can't deal with the kids. That's hard. I really want to give Alicia and Park like the best endings in this whole game.
What is wrong with this pen? It's not working again. What great timing. It's so annoying. Willie gave me this pen. Although it looks like a pen, it is not for writing. I need to use it to slice up the letters, which will then split into pieces. I can then rearrange the pieces before pressing a button on the pen, which makes the pieces reattach themselves into an intact letter. Afterwards, the events in the human's life will happen according to my new arrangement. I can even read about the aftermath in the letter. However, recently, the pen has started to act strangely. I'm hungry. Huh? It's time for afternoon tea. That's strange. Willie has normally brought me snacks by now. Willie, where are you? It's so dark. Where has he gone? It's so dark here, and these stairs feel very old.
What on earth are you doing here?
Turn around, don't look!
As if I wanted to.
Ouch. Why is it so dark here? Is the light bulb out?
Yes, It has been for a long time.
Why don't you have it fixed? Wait, why can't we fix it ourselves? Aren't we gods? Shouldn't we be able to fix a light bulb with a simple wave of a hand?
Who told you that? Even gods have their limitations, and we can't go get whatever we want. You should learn to appreciate what we do have.
Are you saying we need to buy things too, like humans?
Well, we are not entirely like humans in this regard. We don't have to pay rent or mortgage to live here, but not everything is free. We don't need money, but we need faith from the humans.
You mean the more people that go to a temple or church to pray to us, even worship us, the better our lives will become?
Yes, more or less. However, we are not like those gods in the normal sense. For example, in a place with an extreme drought, people would often pray for rain, right? The normal gods would just give them rain if the faithful were deemed worthy. This way, the humans would know that their wishes had been granted. But if we were to grant their wishes, it would mean that the drought had never happened in the first place. Therefore, the humans would never realize that their wishes had been granted. Because there had never been a drought, therefore they never would have had to pray either.
I see. So you're saying that all those people who have asked for our help never realized that they have done so. Does that mean we are going to starve to death?
That is not going to happen, but we might be living in poverty, and we might be suffering.
It's hard being a god.
Well, don't think about it too much. Anyway, were you looking for me?
All right, I almost forgot. The pen hasn't been working well recently. Is it broken?
It's too dark in here. I can barely see. Let's go upstairs to your room.
Isn't there a room right here? Speaking of which, didn't you just come out from there? Is this your room?
Yes, it is.
Well, let's...
No.
I haven't even asked yet. The more he doesn't want me inside, the more curious I get. Is he hiding something unspeakable? But I twisted my ankle when I fell down. I really don't want to climb the stairs.
No problem.
Huh? How did we get up to my room?
'Cause I'm a god.
That's awesome. You know how to teleport? Can I do that too?
Perhaps. Let me take a look at the pen. Well, it might be getting too old to work properly. Just try again later. It should be fine. Anyway, I'll leave you to it. I'll go prepare some snacks for you. Just lie down and rest your ankle.
Teleportation. Humana. I want to teleport! Well, that didn't work. How can I do that? Okay. Let's do our girl Alicia, circus freak. I don't think I like this. I picked up a random bottle from hundreds of bottles of fine wine in the underground wine cellar and put it on the luxurious short table in front of the old man. He nodded with approval and popped the cork. The bright red liquid was poured into an exquisite-looking wine glass. It was swirling and glistening like flowing ruby. Drink it. Drink it. Drink it. I was standing next to him. Sweat was pouring out of my forehead. I had mixed all of the sleeping pills I had stolen into the bottle. It would guarantee a nice nap if he would just drink one glass. Then I should be able to escape from his bedroom window, and I could finally escape this hellhole forever. Money G's lips had already touched the glass when the housekeeper knocked on the door and informed him that there was a visitor. A man with one arm was sitting on the sofa in the living room. Ooh, is it the boss for her brother? Is it Carlos's boss? A couple of tall, muscular bodyguards were standing behind him, ready for instructions from their boss. I had never seen Money Gia act like such a spineless weasel before. He had the most cowardly smile on his face, and he seemed determined to lower himself as much as possible in front of the one-armed man. The man yawned and grabbed the bottle of the flavored wine on the table. Was he going to drink it? Oh no. If he fell asleep, my whole plan would be exposed. And if that should happen, I had to get out now. I quietly took a few steps back, looking for an opportunity to sneak out of the room. The one-armed man raised the bottle to his nose, sniffed, poured the wine out, knocked over the glass. He grabbed the old man towards himself by the collar. The one-armed man wiped his nose on Money G's collar. "You pathetic little prick. You dare try to drug me with sleeping pills?" Money G was shot in the face by the one-armed man before he could utter a word. As soon as the boss was dead, G's bodyguards immediately dropped their weapons and surrendered. All of the other servants and maids, including me, were running towards the nearest exit in a panic. Everyone wanted to get out of there as soon as they could. People were screaming, running into and falling over each other. It was total chaos. However, they didn't intend to let anyone leave here alive. I felt a sharp pain in my left leg when I was only one turn away from the back door. I fell to the floor. Blood was oozing out of the wound in my ankle. I felt the cold barrel of a gun pushing against my forehead. I knew that if I moved even a little, another hole would appear there. Wait. The one-armed man walked over the body of the housekeeper and stopped in front of me. He pushed his man's gun away from my head. "This one is pretty. Send her to the auction house." Not back to the auction house. I thought that it had been the Lord's blessing that he had allowed me to survive. I thought that I had been at least more fortunate than the ones who had died. Never would I have imagined that soon I would be sold to a freak show circus in Southeast Asia. I would have my arms and legs cut off. I'd be hung in a cage like a stick and fed by people like an animal, just for exhibit. Heavenly Father, why wouldn't you save me? Alicia. No. No, Alicia. "You pathetic little prick. You dare try to drug me with sleeping pills?" He stuffed the bottle inside of Money and G's mouth and forced the wine down his throat. The liquid that overflowed from his mouth turned his shirt to the same bright red color. It was her. She did it." He raised his trembling arm and pointed at me. I turned around and ran, but I couldn't outrun the bullet. Blood was oozing out of the center of my forehead, turning the white velvet carpet to a bright red color, but unlike the wine, it was a bewitching kind of red. "Carlos, I miss you so much." No, my favorite character. Oh, that's all the endings. Oh no. Seer, she mentioned the sleeping pills. Maybe let's go back here and change the bottle she grabbed from the sleeping pills to the poison and see what that does. Because we already know she's got the yes. She's got a yes. Or an S. I wiggled my left hand out of the loosened rope and reached for the kit. I grabbed the bottle closer to my left hand. The poison. It was almost the size of half of my palm. I needed to hide it somewhere. I saw the slipper that I had dropped yesterday when I was having a seizure. It was close enough for me to reach it. The doctor came back from his phone call. I was still lying on the bed, all spread out and with my eyes closed, mumbling quietly to myself. Just as he had left me. He felt my forehead with his hand, filled with the IV a bit, closed his kit and left. I opened my eyes when I heard the door close. The bottle of poison was still safely hidden inside the slipper. I know that as long as I do my best, my dream will come true. Okay. Let's see. Oh, we got a lot of letters.
만약 돌아갈 수만 있다면.
Lo siento.
Okay. Let's see how her story is ended. I picked a random bottle from hundreds of bottles of fine wine in the underground wine cellar and put it on the luxurious short table in front of the old man. He nodded with approval and popped the cork. The bright red liquid was poured into an exquisite-looking wine glass. It was swirling and glistening like flowing ruby. Drink it, drink it, drink it. I was standing next to him. Sweat was pouring out of my forehead. Mine too. I'm nervous now. As soon as he drank the wine that had been flavored by me, I would unquestionably become a murderer. I would no longer be a good Catholic. But I had no other choice. I would not let myself be tortured to death in this damned place. I especially would not let myself die without ever seeing Carlos again. He had killed so many innocent people, and I had every reason to send him to his final judgment in front of the Heavenly Father. Maniji's lips had already touched the glass when the housekeeper knocked on the door and informed him that there was a visitor. A man with only one arm was sitting on the sofa in the living room. A couple of tall, muscular bodyguards were standing behind him, ready for instructions from their boss. I had never seen Manijia act more like a spineless, ass-kissing weasel before. Wow, this changed. He had the most cowardly smile on his face. Even he seemed determined to lower himself as much as possible in front of the one-armed man. The man yawned and grabbed the bottle of flavored wine on the table. Was he going to drink it? No, he couldn't drink that. I stepped forward. He grabbed the bottle, emptied it with a smile on his face, and forced everything gurgling down. It was already too late. The wine and cyanide mixture went down his throat and into his stomach. He suddenly stood up with his hands grabbing at the sofa. Then he stumbled and fell. His whole body was twitching on the floor. His hand was now grabbing at his own throat. His mouth was wide open, but he couldn't breathe. The rest of the wine spilled out of the dropped bottle, turning the white velvet carpet into a bright red color. The bodyguards were all panicking. Boss Ray? Boss Ray! Mr. Tough, Boss Ray is... What are you waiting for? Call an ambulance! No ambulance could be faster than cyanide, though. Almost immediately, the one-armed man died. Maniji had been sitting on the sofa as if he had been paralyzed. He kept staring at the body with an incredulous look on his face. He didn't move nor say a word until the bodyguards pointed their guns at his head. It's her! That bitch did it! She poisoned the wine! They wouldn't let anyone get away at this point. They stuffed Maniji and I into the trunk of a car. A proper greeting would be waiting for us. Alicia. Oh no. Let's see the next letter. My late daddy used to lecture me, saying that it was dangerous for us to have a predictable daily routine, as the humans might be able to track our activities. Despite that, I had developed a habit of visiting the fresh seafood store at the corner of the street every day at noon. Today, as usual, I was tank shopping, the tanks in the lobby pondering the most important question to me. What was for lunch? The fish in the left tank were all too big. The fish in the tank next to my feet looked delicious, but there were only 6 of them left, and it would be too obvious if I stole one. I decided that I would go with the tank on the top right corner. No one would notice if one fish was missing, as there were so many in it. And they had fewer bones, too. Most importantly, they were really fresh. I hunched my back and was about to jump up when my ears picked up a tiny noise behind me. The owner had just come into the lobby from the back. I quickly hid behind a tank and watched as he opened the roller doors, washed the ground in front of the entrance, and sat down to wait for the first order of the day. The owner had blonde hair and blue eyes, which was not common in this city. The other humans called him Alex. I sneaked up to the door and meowed softly, pretending that I had just arrived. Following the principle of not trusting humans, I would never intentionally expose my tracks to humans. Still, sometimes I wondered if I needed to be so careful around these humans, whose every move was always so predictable. Take this guy, for instance. I was sure he would not chase me off. Hey, here you are. Just wait there for a second. A couple of minutes later, he placed a glass in front of me and poured me half a glass of milk. Oh, it smelled so good. Milk is truly a cat's best friend. Not really. Some of you guys are lactose. But then I realized I wouldn't be getting any fish today. I meowed at the owner with my cutest expression. I want a full glass. He scratched his chin, seemed to understand something, and went to go and grab something from a cabinet. Then he put a few pieces of dried fish in front of me. Ew. After Daddy had passed away, I spent a whole month eating the dried fish that we had saved together. Ever since then, even the slight sight of dried fish had been enough to make me sick. He pet me on the head. In the end, as a stray cat, I did not have the luxury to be picky about food. Besides, as long as I got along with this human, I could come back often and steal more fresh fish. So I bent my neck and rubbed my head against his hand, pretending to be a docile little kitty, and meowed happily at him. For the record, I was not actually happy. I was licking the milk with my head down when a strong smell of alcohol almost choked me. Pooty, someone spit his phlegm into the nearest fish tank. Here comes trouble. A man with black hair stood in front of the shop. A half-empty beer bottle was dangling from his hand, making a splashing sound. His eyes were wandering and unfocused. I recognized him. He lived in the small house that was the highest one in the community in the hills. Both his wife and his son had blonde hair and blue eyes. They were much better looking than him. Although I had not seen them for a while, I heard that the wife had committed suicide. The owner's eyes stayed fixated on his newspaper, but his hands were trembling. Well, as far as I knew, the relationship between the owner and the other guy's family had been complicated, to say the least. The black-haired man's blonde wife had often been seen hanging out with the owner in a very intimate way. Whenever the neighbors nearby saw them together, they would gossip about it. The owner was very concerned, but the woman didn't seem to care at all. Once I heard some humans chatting that the blonde woman had some kind of illness. What kind of illness would make people behave like that? I couldn't understand. The man had always been very nice to his wife. But the wife was a dragon lady. Not only did she have an affair, she would even beat up her husband and her son. Once I even heard her calling her own son a bastard. He looked so much like her. How could he not be her own son? Well, it was terrible. As the days went by, the man began to lose his spirit too, and he wouldn't go anywhere without alcohol. But the one who had suffered the most must be the little boy. He was so pretty and looked nothing like the other kids, so no other children would play with him. Sometimes I would run into the boy, and if I had nothing else to do, I'd play with him for a little while. If he happened to have some change on him, he would even buy me some milk. Compared to his parents, the kid was almost like an angel with catnip. Anyway, he was not a normal family. Ooh, this is a different perspective. The man stared at the owner for a while, his mouth squeezed out a psst. Then his eyes turned to me. He crouched down and knocked over the glass. All of the milk spilled out. Some even got on my paws. It wasn't the first time this had happened, but the owner still didn't move at all, as if it had nothing to do with him. Damn you, stupid human! How dare you interrupt my meal? You wait there! I stared at the stone-faced man, waving my fist. I swear I'm going to stuff dead rats into your bed tonight. Spotty. Okay. Let's see here. He grabbed the bottle, emptied it with a smile. I stepped forward and knocked over the glass. So he crouched down and forced everything gurgling down. Let's see. Is there anything I can... Nope. If she knocks over the poison, it won't poison the boss. The yellow beer and the white milk mixed together and turned into a disgusting color. How dare you, you lousy loser! That was my lunch! I stared at the stone-faced man, waving my fist. You just wait! I swear I'm going to stuff dead rats into your bed tonight. The stone-faced man, however, seemed to have ignored all of my threats. He stood back up happily, turned away, and walked into the nearby lottery place. Wait, this new milk cocktail seemed to have an extraordinary scent. being the bravest soul in the whole universe, drank the milk that looked like it was going to give me diarrhea. As a result, I did get diarrhea in the evening. What was worse, it smelled absolutely horrible. Damn you, human. The exquisite-looking glass was smashed into pieces near my feet. The bodyguard of the one-armed man immediately raised his gun in case I tried to do something to their boss. The one-armed man himself was sitting calmly on the sofa, as if he was just waiting for a show. The old man looked at the one-armed man nervously and looked back at me. He was still confused. Even though it hadn't gone as planned, I couldn't give up now. Go to hell, you dirty old monster. I bent down and picked up the largest piece of glass, but my right hand was somehow blown into pieces right before my very eyes. And then I felt more bullets hitting me in the chest, shoulders, stomach, legs. I could feel the white velvet carpet touching my face. It felt so soft. Slowly, it had turned into a bright red. Okay, so no. Let's see here. He poured the yellow beer onto my head. Meow! How dare you, you puny human, you puny human! Let me give you a taste of my power. I jumped onto his shoulder and pulled out my ultimate skill, used by the one and only Spotty. The fist of the unbreakable Catty Spotty. After my relentless wave of attacks, his face began to look like a cross-cut fish fillet. While the stone-faced man had a bad personality, he wasn't a bad person, meow. He used to be a road construction worker. He would go to the lottery place on the street sometimes after work to buy some tickets. An old granny used to live there and run the place. 2 years ago, she suddenly lost her sight, and he had resigned from his job to help out at the place. I'd been living on the street for a few years, so there was nothing I didn't know, meow. For the sake of the old granny, I would spare you, meow. I kept swallowing the flavored wine down my own throat. I would rather drink the poisonous wine myself than have some innocent bastard die because of me. Or some innocent bystander die because of me. The bottle smashed into pieces on the floor as a strange sensation took over my body. I could not breathe. My mouth was wide open. I grabbed my throat with both my hands and fell to the floor. My whole body was twitching. As I gradually lost consciousness, I heard a couple of gunshots. The old man fell in front of my face. His eyes were wide open and full of shock. Blood was oozing out of his forehead, turning the white velvet carpet to a bright red color. Even though things had not gone as planned, I could die without regrets now. You dirty old monster. I would haunt you on your way to hell. Okay. Let's see how this works out. The one-armed man accidentally knocked over the glass. The wine spilled out, turning the white velvet carpet to a bright red color. The old man was scared clueless, and he gave me a glance. Get over here and clean everything up for Boss Ray. He knelt before the man and wiped his black leather shoes clean. I picked up the glass and brought it back into the kitchen. When I returned to the room, the one-armed man had already left, and so had the bottle of wine. I overheard the housekeeper saying that the old man had thrown the bottle away because he felt it was jinxed. I had mixed all of the poison into that bottle. What was I supposed to do without it? He looked at me. I looked right back at him. We stared at each other with our different-sized eyes. Of course, I had the bigger eyes. At a moment like this, I had to overpower him with my fearlessness. However, I quietly moved the milk glass behind me a little. After the standoff had lasted for a while, he stood back up defeated. He turned away and walked into the nearby lottery place. Look, I won. Stupid human. Okay, so we got Spotty has rank C. Or Spotty has rank S, and Alicia her C. Let's see if we can flip those and see if that works. The exquisite-looking glasses smashed into pieces near my feet. The one-armed man stared at me with a smile and emptied everything in the bottle onto the floor. The wine was turning the white velvet carpet to a bright red color. The red kept spreading, almost touching my feet. I wanted to step back, but I was paralyzed by his stare. I couldn't move my body even 1 inch. The old man came around after a little while. Did you poison the wine, you dirty bitch? To prove his innocence in front of the one-armed man, he grabbed a fork from the dessert tray and charged towards me in a rage. No. You were the one that should be dead, not me. Not now. I picked up the largest piece of glass from the floor and stabbed at the scumbag. He stabbed the fork into my shoulder, but I had pushed the glass into his heart. The old man made a stifled sound. He stared at me with death in his eyes. He probably had never imagined that one day he would die at the hands of one of his lab rats. I realized that nothing mattered now. I knew I wouldn't be able to survive today. Heavenly Father, forgive me. I pulled the fork out of my shoulder and stabbed it in towards my own neck. I felt it touching the skin and flesh of my neck. I needed to push a little harder to pierce my skin and force it into my artery. My right hand was trembling. My eyes were watering up. I had to use my left hand to support the other one. You must be alive to enjoy life. There's no need to die in a hurry. The fork was gone from my hand. The one-armed man flung his coat over my shoulder, still smiling. Then he held my freezing, trembling hands in his one big palm. I could not remember the last time I had felt such warmth. I broke down sobbing, uncontrollably. Yes, we saved her! Oh my God, my girl. Oh, and that ending is gone. Oh. I want to cry. Oh, that was hard. That was a lot. Let's see what happens here. Spotty's stories are always so funny. Let's see if we can have another funny story. It was the middle of the night. The moon was high up in the sky. A group of cats were gathering at the empty lot near the street. They were both house cats and stray cats. They formed a circle around a big empty pipe in the center of the lot. On top of the pipe sat a fat black cat. He was giving his usual speech. It was unsurprisingly about how humans like pet dogs, and what we should do to make the humans like us more. Those two-legged walking monkeys only considered dogs to be smarter than cats because the dogs would fetch newspapers for them. But the truth was the opposite. Why should we bother to beg for the stupid humans, who couldn't even tell that cats were smarter than dogs to like us? I turned the dead sparrow in front of me around, making sure that there was nothing edible left. No matter how many times I had tried it, the taste of the organs were still disgusting to me. Yuck! Puked out a puddle of yellow liquid. A couple of house cats nearby sprinted away from me. Pressies. Blackie, the fat black cat, kept rumbling on with his boring and pointless speech. I was picking my teeth with my claws. Suddenly, I felt a chill in the air. It was already late autumn. Soon it would be the worst season for us stray cats. I was 1 year old now, almost 20 in human years, so I was fairly strong. Still, lots of homeless cats had died at my age. Instead of wasting my time figuring out how to please those monkeys, I'd rather be preparing for the winter. That pipe seemed like a good place to use as shelter. I walked towards Blackie and jumped up to the pipe. Every shining eye stared at me, including Blackie's. He completely forgot what he was talking about. "Excuse me, may I lie down here for a bit? You may keep going." "You thought I would say that?" Pfft. "Winner takes all, the loser loses it all. And I, Spotty, wanted it all." I stared at Blackie and puffed up my fur. That's right, overwhelming my opponent was the way I do it. He raised a dried salted fish. I spat on his face. Blackie was surprised by my spit, but he immediately swung the salted fish and hit my face with it. This enormous piece of dried salted fish represented unquestionable authority. Whoever had the dried salted fish was the leader of the cats. Furthermore, whoever was attacked by the dried salted fish, which right now meant me, would be considered the public enemy of the entire cat clan. A dozen cats sprung at me, biting my ears, clawing my paws, stepping on my back. Humans had a saying, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands.
and I was facing 40 claws. Ouch, ouch, ouchie. Spotty. Okay. The warehouse now looked like a scene from hell, with bodies laying all over the ground. Lieutenant Kang's eyes were colder than ice. He looked nothing like himself anymore. He turned around slowly and stared at me as if I was only a bug. Oh my god, he looks like John Wick. What had just happened? Was he pulling a prank on me? But he looked entirely serious when he killed Choi Yo-han with one blow. Or rather, was this some kind of initiation test? A test that I had to pass to become an official member? My brain was still completely disoriented when my body jumped backwards by instinct. There was nothing left in the lieutenant's stare, except deadly menace. It was no prank, nor a test. I could feel that what was standing in front of me at this moment was not a normal human, but a dangerous beast. It was waiting for me to expose my vulnerability so that it could lunge at me and tear out my throat. We were both standing dead still. We were both staring deep into each other's eyes, and we were both thinking of the best way to prevail. I didn't have enough confidence. Even at the Shaolin Temple, I had never faced an opponent like this before. Nevertheless, I began to feel something, perhaps because of my training at the temple. I was feeling nothing but growing excitement, and I was eager to give it my all in this fight. It was almost as if I had been waiting for this day my whole life. It would not do me any good if we kept stalling like this. I decided to at least poke my opponent first. In the world of Kung Fu, speed defines the winner. Time to fight. He raised the gun. I flung my tail out as hard as I could. I took a shot and flung my tail out from my sleeve. The spearhead cut through the air with a shimmer, aimed at Lieutenant Kang's right hand, which was holding the gun, but it stopped right before the lieutenant. Lieutenant Kang's left hand clenched into a fist, and he slowly lowered it. He was holding my tail firmly in his hand. Despite having been cut by the spear tip, blood was dripping down from his wrist. Behind his fist, his eyes were staring at me with nothing but contempt. No one had been able to stop my tail with their bare hands before. At this point, I had no choice but to drop my weapon. But Lieutenant Kang had finally seen his chance. He sprinted at me, still holding my tail in his left hand and the gun in his right. Then I heard a gunshot, before I sank into an infinite darkness filled with nothing but regret. A few weeks later, I woke up in the ICU at Busan Metropolitan Hospital. I was incredibly lucky to survive the shot to my head. However, the bullet was lodged into my skull in a delicate spot, so the doctors could not take it out. As a result, I had to endure occasional migraines for the rest of my life. With my health condition, I thought that I would be reassigned to some boring post like the archives, but I didn't expect that they would ask me to resign. The police paid me a lot of money as compensation, but that was not what I had wanted. I wanted to be a police officer. How could everything turn out like this? Cheng Guan-min. A piece of dried fish and a gun. I think I could come up with something funny here. But can I really just switch them like this? How could a cat be holding a gun? Of course, that's what our power is. No matter what, events will unfold exactly according to your arrangement of the next text. Even if it's something ridiculous or even supernatural, it is still within the realm of the reasonable for us. This is how we are able to help Jimmy's class with the relay race. All we did was switch Jimmy from the last leg to the third leg, remember? As long as the internal logic of the story is not self-contradictory, there won't be any problems. In this case, what kind of logic shall we consider self-contradictory? For example, earlier we discussed that after someone fainted or even died, he or she would not be able to perform additional actions. Therefore, any additional actions after a piece where the subject passed out or worse would automatically disappear. Okay, I think I've got it. Let's just change all of it. Make sure there's no places I can hide information. I slammed my tail on the pipe. Bang! It was my battle cry. Blackie was in shock. This was probably the first time any cat had ever challenged him. He nervously pulled the trigger. Wait, why did he have a gun? Bang! An enormous sound echoed across the lot. A few windows in the nearby neighborhood lit up. The cats scattered as fast as they could, including Blackie. Only I was still sitting on top of the pipe in the empty lot, and my urine was dripping down from the pipe. In any case, this was my territory now. Okay. My spit flew into his eyes and temporarily blinded him. I thought I had the upper hand, but Lieutenant King swiftly took a swing at me from it with his right hand based on nothing but his hearing. He wasn't an easy opponent, that was for sure. A dried salted fish flew out from his right hand, charging towards me like a flash of light. Wait, a salted fish? I quickly moved aside and dodged it. Thank goodness it was just a dried salted fish. Well, now that you have missed your chance, it is my turn. I stomped on the ground and sprinted forward. I tightened my back muscles and rotated my shoulder, then swung my arm with my shoulder, and finally punched him with my fist. Attack number 3. Thunderbolt punch! I hit Lieutenant King straight in his chest. He flew backward and slammed into a pillar. Finally, I could tell that he would be dreaming about Buddha for a while. I wiped the sweat off my face and let out a long breath. I had avoided hitting the lieutenant's crucial spots and the punch earlier, so I knew he would be okay. Knew he should be okay. But what kind of person was he? I never realized that I would witness not one, but 2 masters in the Busan police precinct today. The custodian from the armory and Lieutenant King. How interesting. I suppose it wouldn't be too bad to stay in Unit 4 then. I would love to spar with the lieutenant in the future. Aw, that's so cute. Okay. Let's see here. Alright. We're gonna do the taste of early summer. Sunday afternoon, the sun was warm and the smell of the flowers was dancing in the early summer wind. I was standing in front of the exhibition center, waiting nervously. A few days ago, Mr. Wen had fainted in his apartment due to exhaustion. Fortunately, I had found him in time, otherwise the consequences would have been inconceivable. He had given me a ticket to the art exhibit today as a thank you. I had been so excited that I got a ticket that I forgot to ask if it was the only ticket he had. Or would he be coming too? It also happened to be my birthday. I had not celebrated my birthday in years, but I specifically put on my favorite dress before I left my apartment. As a matter of fact, I had never heard of the exhibit's artist. To be better prepared, I had visited dozens of bookstores just to find a book of his collection. Even as late as last night, I had been looking up his work online. And I hadn't gone to bed until it was almost daytime. I had set several alarms just to make sure that I wouldn't oversleep. At 1 p.m., the show had officially started. The line was getting shorter, but I still hadn't seen Mr. Wen. I took out my phone and hesitated, wondering whether or not to text him. Eventually, I decided not to. Another hour had passed. I couldn't stop myself anymore, and I sent him a text. The art show today is really cool. Thank you so much for the ticket, Mr. Wen. I'm in the gift shop near the north entrance right now. They have a lot of cute little things here, and Are you coming today too, Mr. Wen? Another hour had passed. It started to drizzle. I sent him a text. It's raining. Remember to bring an umbrella with you if you are headed out, Mr. Wen. I wandered near the entrance, but I didn't want to walk too far away. Another hour had passed. There's a book signing at the west entrance right now. I just bought an art collection book. I think it's going to be sold out soon. Mr. Wen, would you like me to buy you a copy? Another hour had passed. Mr. Wen, I'm about to head back. Thank you again. I waited until 5 o'clock, and he never showed up. Perhaps
He only had one ticket in the first place. It was my fault for assuming too much. The rain had turned from a drizzle to a downpour. I walked home alone without an umbrella. I couldn't tell if it was because of the rain, but I cried. Le win. Let's see. I don't think there are any obvious leads by reading this letter. In this story, how does the difference between the west entrance and the north entrance have an impact on the result?
Judging from this letter alone, you are right. We are unable to tell how they will impact the ending yet. But I would still encourage you to give it a try. By switching their positions, maybe then you'll see the effects in the new ending. Sometimes you won't know for sure without trying.
So you mean that the clues might not just be in the original letter, but they might also be hidden inside the other endings that we unlock?
That's exactly right.
Okay, let's see here. If we switch... Let's see, if we switch if she was at the western entrance and the northern entrance. I waited until 5 o'clock, and he never showed up. I took off the Sir Spotty mascot costume and gave it back to the staff member at the west entrance. The staff member who had to take off earlier for an upset stomach kept thanking me. He said that if he hadn't found a stand-in before 4 p.m., he would have lost his year-end bonus. The rain had turned from a drizzle to a downpour. I walked home alone, without an umbrella. Okay. Let's see if that changes. Six o'clock, the rain had turned from a drizzle to a downpour. I was still standing at the entrance waiting. The exhibit was over. My phone's battery had run out. People were coming out of the exhibit center and raising their umbrellas. There were more and more umbrellas around me. Everyone's face was hidden behind one. I was slowly swallowed in an ocean of umbrellas, and I couldn't even see the road outside anymore. I crouched down. The rain kept falling. I couldn't tell if it was because of the rain, but I cried. Aww. Let's see here. He's gotta text back eventually, right? It was just past 5 o'clock. A garbage truck had a sudden flat tire on the road outside the north entrance. There was garbage everywhere. The staff of the exhibit center all pulled on their raincoats and ran down the stairs to pick up the trash. I decided to go out and help since I wasn't doing anything anyway. Lots of people walked by and took pictures of me with their phones. I struck a pose, cooperatively with a victorious gesture. Haha, look at me. I am the guardian of the environment, Sir Spotty. It was already 7 o'clock when we were finally done, and the exhibit had been over for a while by then. My phone's battery had run out. In the end, I didn't see him. I took off the Sir Spotty mascot costume and gave it back to the staff member at the west entrance. The staff member who had to take off earlier for an upset stomach kept thanking me. He said that if he hadn't found a stand-in before 4 p.m., he would have lost his year-end bonus. Okay, I feel like we're closer. Let's see here. It was just past 5 o'clock. A garbage truck had a sudden flat tire on the road outside the north entrance. There was garbage everywhere. The staff of the exhibition center all put on their raincoats and ran down the stairs to pick up the trash. I decided to go out and help since I wasn't doing anything anyway. Soon, I happened to run into someone I knew in the crowd. It was Jimmy, who had just recently transferred to my school. What a coincidence. We started chatting while picking up garbage. Jimmy said he was a huge gamer, and he told me the plot from one of his favorite video games. In the game, the player could play as a god and help solve the humans' troubles. The funny thing was, those humans' troubles were all incredibly dumb. I could barely understand him, but judging from the excited look on his face, it must be a pretty interesting game. It was already 7 o'clock when we were finally done, and the exhibit had been over for a while by then. Jimmy asked if I wanted to go and grab something to eat. I looked down at my phone and realized that the battery had run out. I felt a little choked up in my throat. Okay. I feel like that has to be the end. Let's see here, that gave us rank A. D. 6 o'clock. The rain had turned from a drizzle to a downpour. I was still in the Sir Spotty mascot costume, standing at the entrance. My phone's battery had run out. The exhibit was over. People were coming out of the exhibit center. Thank you so much for today. You can get out of the costume now. Again, you saved my life today. The staff member who had to take off earlier for an upset stomach kept thanking me. He said if he hadn't found a stand-in, he would have lost his year-end bonus. I was just about to pull the mascot head off when someone bumped into me. I couldn't see anything with the head on. I only knew that I was falling down the stairs. Ouch, ouch, ouch! I finally stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I suspected that every bone in my body had been broken. I was sure that I must have looked pathetic with the mud plastered all over myself. Are you okay? The voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't be sure because of the sound from the heavy rainfall. A powerful hand grabbed my arm and pulled me up. I took the mascot head off in a hurry. I saw in front of me that same casual outfit. He raised an umbrella over my head, but his shoulders were getting wet. We ordered 2 cups of hot cocoa from the cafe on the first floor of the exhibit center and sat at a table next to the window. The rain had become so heavy that we couldn't leave, but I was feeling like the luckiest girl on earth. He told me that the exhibit was organized for a friend of his. He didn't know I was still here until he had seen the text just a little while ago. There had been too many people at the entrance when he arrived, and he wouldn't have been able to find me if I had not been so eye-catching. So it was his friend's exhibit. He hadn't planned to come with me. Lightning suddenly flashed outside the window, and all of the lights went out in the cafe. A waiter came over to apologize. He lit up a candle and placed it on our table. The outside view became clearer now that it was darker inside. He turned and looked outside the window towards the blurry, greenish mountain far away. He suddenly changed the subject. That mountain is called Shangri-La Mountain. In weather like this, you can see the most beautiful rainbow in the mountains when the rain stops. Have you ever painted it? I remembered the painting in his apartment. The rainbow in his painting must be even more beautiful than the real one. But he shook his head. The most beautiful views can only live on in memories. I could see the candlelight flickering in his eyes. It was supposed to be the color of warmth, but I couldn't sense any temperature. A voice suddenly surfaced from deep within my heart, and it was overcoming my own self-control. I couldn't stop myself from blurting out the question. Mr. Wynn, May... Do you want to go home now? Sorry, I forgot. It is pretty late. Mr. Wynn took his eyes away from the mountain, gave me an apologizing look, and reached for the umbrella next to our seats. No, not that. Could I get a picture with you? What the hell was I talking about? I pulled out my phone in a hurry, but then I realized that the battery had run out quite a while ago. How embarrassing. I wanted to crawl into a hole. Mr. Wynn took out his own phone instead and handed it to a waiter passing by. I held onto the cup of cocoa nervously and smiled like an idiot. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Let's take another one. Young lady, get a little closer to your boyfriend, please. What? Boyfriend? You don't understand. I mean, really. Before I could explain, the waiter had taken another picture. I turned my head towards him, and he was so close. The first thing I did when I finally got home was plug in my phone. As soon as I turned it back on, I received a text from Mr. Wynn. It was a photo. Later, I bought a brand new photo album. I printed the photo out and put it in the first page. It was the best birthday gift I had ever gotten. Aww. Alright, lots of letters.
No puedo regresar.
내 탓이야. 맞지.
为什么会这样？
Alright, let's do a gray world. The manga was gray. The sky was gray. Even the happy 3 friends that had been playing on the screen looked gray. For the past 2 days, I had been faking a foot injury. I hadn't left the room at all. Even all of my meals had been brought home by Rocky. I felt like a lump of sludge rotting in front of the computer, staring at it all day. Why would she spend her birthday with the art teacher, Mr. Wynn? Were they a couple? I closed the episode of Happy 3 Friends. I then logged into my secret blog. All of the recent entries had been about her. The most recent one had some pictures that I had taken on her birthday. She had gone into a cafe with Mr. Wynn, and they left together, rode the subway together. They even went into the same apartment building. Even though I had soon found out that they were neighbors, it still felt like too much of a coincidence. Did she move next door to him, knowing that he lived there? I kept scrolling through the pictures, imagining that it had been me with her instead. I had been looking at her from afar, but I couldn't summon the courage. What if I had finally had my line ready? When I finally had my line ready, it was Mr. Wynn who got in ahead of me. Jimmy, I'm going to eat the last piece of the cake in the fridge if you don't. Rocky yelled from the living room. Yeah, go ahead. I wiped my face hastily. Thank you. I'll bring you some more chicken legs tonight. Rocky had thought it was my birthday 2 days ago. I had ordered the cake from Hong Kong. Thank goodness I hadn't put her name on it. I took another glance at those annoying pictures and then clicked the delete button. The confirmation dialogue popped up, yet I couldn't do it. I dragged myself to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror. My face was horribly pale. My hair was all messed up and my eyes were so red. Even the reflection seemed to be mocking my loser self. I took a wet towel and went back to the computer. I raised my glass with boiled water and poured some milk into it. I grabbed the face cream and squeezed the container. I held the glass up and stirred, then took a big sip. I didn't realize that I just made a huge mistake. I just thought the milk tasted bitter because of my horrible mood. Yet it also had a minty taste, and my tongue was feeling a little numb. I looked at the bottle I had just used. Smoothie face cream. Make your face smooth like a smoothie. Then I remembered that I had run out of honey half a month ago. I spilt out all of the remaining flavored milk onto the computer. But the real tragedy was yet to come. While I was busy wiping my keyboard, I accidentally pressed enter. I never had any backup for those pictures, as I had always felt guilty about them in the first place. So now they were all gone. All gone. Jimmy. Aww. First baby's heartbreak. Let's see here. Let's not have him add the face cream into his milk. I eventually hit the cancel button. I still couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't tell if I was just too tired or if it was because of the milk. I hunched over the desk and fell asleep. Aww. I feel like something good's gonna happen to him. We'll do Chengguan Ming last, and then we'll call it quits. Port of Busan near Warehouse 23. About 40 people were there, lying, standing, running. The fishermen who were up early for work had gathered around when they realized that something big had happened. The reporters who had heard some tips were huddling with them, hoping to catch any newsworthy material that could make a career. But the only two people who knew what had happened had already left the scene. The ambulance was traveling as fast as it could while trying to remain steady. Lieutenant Kang was lying on the seat opposite me. He was still unconscious. The medic said that he was basically asleep, and there was no need to worry. I wasn't surprised after all. I had intentionally avoided his critical spots earlier. Maybe after the nap he would be even more relaxed. Tired. I felt so tired. First I had to knock out a mob of gangsters, then I had been threatened by Choi Yo-han, and then I still had to fight the lieutenant. I hadn't slept the whole night. Still, I had so many questions in my head that I couldn't resist at all. Why would Lieutenant Kang attack me? And how had he become so strong, like another person completely? What kind of secrets had the lieutenant been hiding? Furthermore, this bald-headed, muscular man who was lying between us due to loss of blood, who was he? Considering the situation with the lieutenant, I began to find the big man suspicious too. I quietly took a syringe from a tray near us and hid it, just in case one of them suddenly woke up and tried to stab me with it like a maniac. His veins. The medic mumbled something while trying to get the big man an IV. Suddenly, the ambulance took a sharp left turn, and the driver slammed on the brakes to slow down. I heard a few curses from the driver's seat. The ambulance started again, and we noticed that the needle had slashed the muscular man, that there was a deep cut in his arm. Strangely, though, there was no blood coming out of the cut at all. Transfiguration. I stared at the red operating sign in the ER. I was trying to remember the documentaries about transfiguration that I had seen in the police academy. Transfiguration was a skill that not only could change one's looks, but even one's figure. A transfiguration expert could wear a disguise that was good enough to fool anyone further than 20 centimeters away. This was my first time ever witnessing it in such a close distance. It was so shockingly real. The bodysuit had a different thickness in different areas. The thicker parts perfectly resembled the texture of bulging muscles. The suit was also completely skin-tight once put on a person, leaving no gaps between the suit and the wearer's skin, preventing people from sensing anything unnatural by contact. It was very difficult to replicate the texture of real skin on the suit, though. Most people who wore it to transfigure themselves would be exposed when people touched their skin. However, this female senior officer with a perfect body was brave enough and skilled enough to go undercover in a violent gang, all while pretending to be a shirtless meathead. It simply meant that she must be a master among masters in transfiguration. The people in Unit 4 were practically superheroes. I took out a pack of tissues from my pocket and calmly wiped off the blood coming out of my nose. Not only was this my first time seeing somebody using transfiguration, it was also my first time seeing a naked, gorgeous woman like this. Lieutenant Kang had told me before that Officer Ji Yun had never attended the police academy, so she was even younger than me. More importantly, she also had a head full of shining, long, and straight black hair. She was essentially a goddess from my dreams. From now on, I would be able to spend time with a senior officer like this every day. Ching Guanming, could die a happy man at any time now. Someone just had come out of the operating room. It was a young nurse. She ran towards me as I was the only person in the hallway. "Are you a family member of the patient?" I nodded my head. shook it, and nodded again. She has lost too much blood. We need at least 1,200 cc's more for a transfusion, but we are running out of blood. There haven't been enough donations recently. Our blood bank doesn't have enough blood of her type in storage. We are also having a shortage of another type too. I think it is... Oh, right, it was type A. What is Officer Ji Yun's blood type? Type O? What was my blood type again? I remembered I had it checked before. Let me think. Yes, it was type A. Lieutenant Kang, who had been asleep since we got to the hospital, was suddenly standing behind me. Mine is type B. The nurse looked sympathetic. I'm sorry, but neither of your blood type is a match. I'll have to go and call another hospital. I hope it is not too late. A few minutes after she had hurried away, the sign went off. The doctor slowly pushed open the door to the operating room. Everything seemed to be moving in slow motion, and the door looked like it was as heavy as a mountain. I'm so sorry. I held my head in my hand, staring at the floor. I couldn't breathe. It was all because of my little trick. If I hadn't shot her, if only I were a better police officer, she would still be alive. Ching Guanmin. Aww. Let's see here. If we make her O the type that's out, and Kim B. So O is a universal. Like they can take universal. Let's see. The nurse looked at Lieutenant Kang. In this case, we can only take 400 cc from you, plus the 400 cc of type O in the storage, and it might be enough. We will do our best. After she had drawn my blood, Lieutenant Kang and I both sat on the long bench in the hallway. The air was filled with anxiety, but all we could do was wait. An hour later, the sign went off. The doctor walked out, saw us, and rubbed his eyes. The operation was a success, but the patient has lost too much blood, and we are not sure when she will wake up. In the worst-case scenario, I clenched my fist. Lieutenant Kang's breathing was getting louder and heavier too. She might fall into a vegetative state. Okay. Let's see here. I know we should pick O, the type that's out. The nurse looked at Lieutenant Kang. In this case, we can only take 400 cc from you. But the 400 cc isn't enough. I'll draw the blood from you first, go call another hospital later. I hope it won't be too late. I sat beside them. I watched the nurse as she drew the blood from the lieutenant, but there was nothing else I could do. Once she was done, the nurse picked up the tray and was about to leave. Wait, take some more. Lieutenant Kang suddenly grabbed her hand. But if I do, you will... She tried to wiggle her hand out, but the lieutenant was not letting go. Just do it. It's my blood, and I get to decide what I want to do with it. I completely understood the lieutenant. If it had been me, I would do the same thing. Not just 400 cc. If I had 4,000 cc, I'd be willing to donate all of it. The nurse put down her tray and drew another 200 cc. The lieutenant still wanted her to keep going, but she wouldn't do it, no matter what. In the end, she ran away like she was trying to escape from us. An hour later, the sign went off. The doctor walked out, saw us, and rubbed his eyes. The operation was a success, but the patient had lost too much blood, and we are not sure when she will wake up. In the worst-case scenario, I clenched my fist. Lieutenant Kang's breathing was getting louder and heavier, too. She might fall into a vegetative state. Okay, so we need to make B the type that's out. O is universal, so it can be one of theirs. And Jing, we'll try this. Great, both of your blood types are a match. We'll take 400 cc from each of you, plus the last 400 of type O blood in our storage, and it should be enough. I'll do blood from both of you immediately. She gently pushed a needle into my arm. I watched as the blood slowly filled a bag, thinking about how it was going to save her life. You've been in my unit for a while now. I never had the chance to tell you something. Lieutenant Kang, who had his blood drawn earlier, leaned on the long bench next to me and spoke to me. Considering what I had accomplished today, was he going to reward me with something? To tell me something? Could it be, "You're very good. You're the best new recruit I have ever seen. Unit 4 is so lucky to have you"? I just couldn't stop my imagination. He took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. But then he must have realized that he couldn't smoke here, so he took it out and put it back in the pack. Never be late again. If you are, I'll have you transferred. Aww. Alright. Let's see what letters we have. Alright. I'll call it here for today, and see you all next time. Thanks for playing with me. Bye.